Good morning, and welcome to our candidate forum. I'm Janet Becker of the Elections Committee, and we thank you for attending our forum and being involved in this very important election process. Before we get started, please silence your cell phones. We also ask you to be civil and courteous audience during this session. All sessions will be recorded and available on the Sun City Lincoln Hills website. Each forum will have different questions. Therefore, we encourage you to attend or watch all the candidate forums. In addition to today, there are two more forums, and they will be Thursday, January 16th at 2 o'clock in the ballroom, Saturday, January 18th at 10 o'clock, exactly right here. We'd like to remind you that you have an opportunity to vote by mail. Drop your ballot in the ballot box at Orchard Creek or drop your ballot off at the Inspector of Elections office. Ballots must be received by the Inspector of Elections no later than 3 o'clock p.m. on February 19th. Those instructions will be in your ballot packet when you receive them, probably sometime at the first of next week. The agenda for our program today will be as follows. First, we will introduce each of our candidates. Then each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves and to present their statement of candidacy. This will be followed by our question and answer portion where they will have 1.5 minutes each to answer 6 questions. The candidates will have 3 minutes to make their closing statements. Last, there will be a member issue statement read aloud. Now I will introduce all of the candidates. The seating order of the candidates was determined by a random drawing that they did themselves, I'd like to say. And I'd like to introduce to you Hans Fakima, Joe Stewart.
Do we have to test our mics to tell us that we're here? Oh.
That's all been done. Tom Donapass, Diana Peters, Jack Harris, and David Connor. The candidates will each have 2 minutes to introduce themselves and present their statement of candidacy. We will start with Hans.
Good morning. I just completed 4 years as an active member of the Finance Committee, and during that time I headed up the Reserves Task Force, which was focused on strengthening our reserve position, which at times had been ignored in the past in order to keep dues low. While we're not yet exactly where we would want to be, we are currently probably in the strongest reserve position that we've been in the past 15 years. In addition to heading up that task force, I was liaison to the Properties Committee and the Facilities Department, and I attended nearly all board meetings. My time at the committee was a great learning experience. I learned how our association worked and how the budget process worked. And I was also able to develop good working relationships with our department heads, yes, with all 7 of them. I believe it was a good preparation for serving on the board, and I will gladly admit that 4 years ago, I would not have been qualified to do so. I very much doubt if any of us, regardless what we have done before we moved here, had the opportunity to work with an HOA with 6,783 homes and all the different amenities and activities that we offer. Getting involved and learning the ins and outs of our disorganization is a very useful and, in my personal opinion, essential preparation. While serving on the board, it was certainly not my goal when I joined the Finance Committee, but after having completed my tenure there, it seemed like a logical thing to do so. While I'm not a good politician and I do not want to make promises I may not be able to keep, I would like to be able to continue to serve this community and use whatever I have learned and the experience I have gained. It would be a shame to let that go. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. Joe.
I'm Joe Stewart, currently on the board and seeking your votes for re-election to the board. It's been a fascinating and it's been a fascinating 2 years. It's really what I have to say. We accomplished much. We this year, in fact, have spent a lot of time coming together and becoming a working group, which I would say we have done. And this time and this moment, I want to basically tell you that I've been working on the 18 questions that you gave us. Friday was a different set of questions, and earlier on were different ones yet. So I've been kind of going from one to the next and dealing with it. And I simply want to say that my answers will be my own. I got no help from anyone. Even my wife stayed away and did other things while I was fumbling around with what I want to say about what. So they're my answers. Win, lose, or draw. I really do love it here. I felt from the very get-go when we first looked at this place when they were contouring the golf course in '99, I had no idea and no thought of living in a old people's place to begin with, and but it grew on us, and we came back, and here we are, 20 years later, loving it, and I look forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Tom.
Good morning. I'm Tom Dunapace. I want to thank you all for taking your time out of your day and morning to educate yourself on the candidates and our differing or in some situations same positions. I'm running for the board to address what I perceive as a systemic dysfunction of our process, procedures, and communication. As a former city manager, city attorney, and certified court mediator, I bring lifelong skills to the board to address these issues. Everyone says they want transparency, but when they get into office, where did it go? I know how to be transparent. I've been on HOA boards in the past. I've been a member of a planning commission, design and architectural review boards. I know how to interact with various committees. I'm not here to turn our HOA upside down. I want to fix what's broken. 90% or better, it runs just perfect, like a well-oiled machine. But I am opposed to outside management. I support our current structure in our administration. I desire to enhance our security as we're impacted by regional growth. I desire more cooperation with the golf operation as their success or failure is tied directly to our property values. Please listen carefully as we respond to your questions today, but more importantly, follow up, contact me directly with your additional questions or concerns. I'm here for you.
Thank you, Tom. Diana.
Good morning, neighbors. I arrived here in 2017 as a renter, and I knew right away that I had landed well. I have been in 3 HOAs before here. I have experiences with all of the different kinds of management positions that all of those HOAs had. The first one I was in was a gated 24-hour secure private HOA with a golf course. Some of the situations that I faced there, we will face here. One day, a developer came and said, which side of the fence would you like the net to go? We had no idea they had sold the property next door and we were going to lose our golf course. This is a long story, and someday I'll tell you about that. We persevered, but it wasn't easy. Another one that I was involved in is a rural community in North Natomas. We were there before the houses came. It's like the Indians before the white man came. We were just out there, rice fields, and our property was the whole HOAs. We were right on the county line and the city line. So to get services was very difficult because if we went to the city, they said it was the county. If we went to the county, they said it was the city. So we had to do a lot of work just to be able to maintain our roads. Whoops. The third was the country club in Davis, which we did convert. It was very much like here. We had tennis courts and a golf course, and we converted to professional management. So I have some experience on how that would go. And then the last thing I've done is here in Lincoln Hills, I started a group called Boom, which some of you have gone to our activities. It was for, thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Jack.
Good morning. You know, I don't like people that I've listened to read things, but I am going to kind of read this first part, and I promise not to do that again. When someone runs for an office, they naturally want to be elected, so it can be tempting to make promises or statements that they know cannot be kept or they know are not true in order to get votes. In some cases, candidates are not familiar with what is doable and not, and once elected are faced with the fact that they cannot deliver on promises made. The jarring reality results in a loss of trust, contention with members, and a lack of positive progress of the community. I am a candidate that will not promise you anything until I am sure I can get it done. For me, integrity and transparency are king. Integrity is simply doing what I say I will do. And I can promise you, the one promise I can make you, I'm going to do what I say I will do. And transparency is communicating regularly and sharing with our residents as much as legally possible. It's what I call promises made and promises kept. Promises I can make you now: I promise to be a great listener with an open door, to be highly visible and demonstrate positive leadership and support, to be direct, candid, and forthright when needed, to work diligently to make Meridians a consistently enjoyable and quality experience that we can be proud of, to be tireless in my efforts to manage dues without unnecessarily high increases, to be an independent thinking and impartial candidate with allegiance to the role of board member and representative of our community. I bring significant experience in leadership and negotiation and believe I can work with other board members toward compromise, consensus, and agreement in the best interest of Sun City Lincoln Hills. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. David.
Am I next? Hi, I'm David Connor. I'm currently, this last year, I've been the president of your board. I served on the board in 2009 through 2012 for 4 years. That's where I got this nice jacket. I took a few years off. I've been on the board most recently for 2 years. The first thing I want to talk about is when I became president earlier last year. The very first thing that happened was that our election committee, they decided that they wanted to take off and retire, and they resigned. 3 or 4 did stay, and I thank them for that. We put out a note for members, and in 2 weeks, it was filled. I've sat and I've watched this election committee work. They're all sitting down front here. They've done a fantastic job. I'm not sure, they might not be the very best committee we ever had, but in a few short weeks, you're going to be very proud of yourself. This first year has been really fantastic, so good job on that. At this point, all of our committees, our staff and teams, they like to be called now, are just in excellent shape. I've never seen, it's been very good. We have the same people. They are motivated. Holy mackerel, 30, I'm going to have to skip to the back of this thing real quick. Anyway, the association, we're in good shape. We're in good stead. One of the best things that we did last year is we doubled our funding, and I'm your president, sorry. We doubled our funding outside of our budget, and we have plenty of money to work with. I'll have to continue this at the end, apparently. Sorry.
Thank you, David. And thank you to all of our candidates. Now we will move on to our question and answer portion. The members of the election committee reviewed the questions submitted in question boxes located on information tables in both lodges, as well as questions submitted by email. A record number of 86 questions was submitted by you. Thank you. Many covered the same question, and we were therefore combined into one question. Questions submitted that do not apply to association business were not used. I will address each question to a specific candidate on a rotating basis. That candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond to the question. All other candidates in order of seating will then have the chance to answer the same question in turn for 1.5 minutes. The election committee this year decided to give all of the questions to the candidates in advance of this forum. At the end of our session, each candidate will be given 3 minutes for a closing statement. We ask that the audience holds all applause or comments during the presentation, and I'll be watching that. It's disruptive and it takes too much time. We'll thank all of the candidates at the end of the presentation. If you have questions that have not been answered, or if you want to introduce yourself to the candidates, they will be available after the forum for 30 minutes down the hallway to the Sierra room. There are tables set up there, and they will be ready to answer any questions that all of you have. Our timekeepers, Lila Gann and Twyla Miller, will raise a card, as they have already, stating that there is 30 seconds remaining and a stop sign when the time is up. 1.5 minutes for each candidate to answer the question, 3 minutes for the closing statement. And the first question goes to Hans. What do you think is our association's greatest concern, and how would you address it?
In order to remain the desirable community for active adults over 55 that we currently are, we need to be able to adapt to changing circumstances. That will require an effective strategy and a planning process and efficient use of the Community Enhancement Fund. I hope that after the strategic planning process is completed, we will have a complete list of all the potential strategic enhancement projects that will be used to make our infrastructure better. That will require, should be made available to all of us. It also requires us then to start communicating on what needs to be done, and that is not going to be an easy process. But there's not one specific concern that I would really address at this point, although some people think that the Meridians is it, but we'll talk about that later. One of the things that struck me is how few people right now understand the different functions of operations, reserves, and CEF. Clearly, more education is needed because we all need to understand that better, and we will need to work on that because that's critical. I think that will probably about get me to the stop sign, right?
Thank you, Hans. Joe.
Yes. Well, I guess the first thing I would say is greatest concern is no, it's not Meridians. At worst, that's a $2 or $3 a month problem, and I think we have bigger problems than that. I believe that our greatest concern on an ongoing basis is to attract and keep good employees. And that comes down to money, plain and simple. The pay scale we're operating on is dismally low, and I think Chris O'Keefe deserves huge kudos for finding and keeping good people as well as he's managed to do year in and year out. He finds good people, often very green, and brings them along. But eventually, a lot of these good people find that they can make enough more money, 10, 15, 20% or more dollars, and off they go. Say, I like it here, but gosh, I gotta go with my family and what works for us, and a shorter commute to begin with. I'm told we're in the middle of the pay range for nonprofits. That may well be, but nonprofits are often staffed with a lot of almost volunteers for whom it's a labor of love, not money. Our employees want to get paid. So I think that's somehow we're going to have to take a deep breath and figure out how to do that. We've solved everything but that, almost.
Thank you, Joe. Tom?
I really think our greatest concern, or actually three concerns. My foremost is the dysfunction that I see emanating from what I don't believe to be a strong legal advice that creates a strong board that gives direct instruction to our administrative staff. When I was a city manager, if I didn't have a strong city council directing what they wanted done, I did what I wanted to do. So I think we need to strengthen that dysfunction. The second thing is I really want to see us focus on our security. Right now we spend over $200,000 a year on the curator security system. I think there's ways to make that money go further and enhance the community. But then, you know, during your lifespan, something comes up and it turns everything else, all your priorities upside down. And that's probably the biggest concern, is the golf course. Modesto announced today, if you saw the news, they're closing their municipal golf course. That's why I want to strengthen our communication, our cooperation with the golf entity so we can keep our finger on that button and a pulse to react in case they decide to cut back their services. And any impact on the golf course directly impacts our property values. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Diana?
Concerns, well, actually, I want to define the word association's greatest concern. I think we need to break it apart because the association is made up of components. We have the residence issues, we have the management issues, committee concerns, residents' concerns, and board issues. And what my biggest concern is the discord that I'm seeing or have seen at our meetings, our board meetings. The board takes a lot of pressure and does a lot of hard work, and I think is underappreciated. So that's my main concern. But most residents here, they just want to live in harmony. They really love their community. They participate in their favorite activity. And I think the board has done a great job trying to make that. The committees work really hard. There it is. So the number one thing that I think we need to tackle is the accounting. I think if we get a good grip on our accounting systems and be able to settle our balance, of course, it's the Meridians thing, but if we are able to get a good handle on where the money goes, a lot of the problems here will be solved and harmony will end up back in our laps. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diana. Jack?
First of all, I want to express that what a great place we live here, what an idyllic place we live here, and thank God for the 200 or 300 quality volunteers that we have. It just helps us in immense ways. My greatest concern about the association's problem is the fact that if you look at this meeting, we have about 115 people here. We've got another 11,300 and some that aren't here. We have some that watch the videos. But overall, we have way too many people who don't know what's going on. Maybe they don't care what's going on. They're not informed well. The communication isn't good either way, coming to us or going back to you, back to the board and back and forth. So I think we ought to do whatever is necessary through as many venues as we can to get to those people and inform them. We have most of the people here, as someone else has mentioned, that haven't even read the governing documents. And I'll be honest, I didn't read them until about 3 months ago when I decided to run for the board. So it's important that we get the word out there that what we can do and what we can do as a resident and be informed and get the people through e-news, through the Compass, through various ways, messages and information that it's important that they have. And I don't think we do a very good job of that.
Thank you, Jack. David?
I'm sorry. The number one issue for me, just last night, probably not many of you have seen it. I was privy to the final year end of our restaurant. It's even worse than I expected it would be. I'm very concerned about the restaurant. When I see large deficits, I think there's linkage to that and quality and service and other things. This past week, I've been talking to the executive director a lot. I think he does have a plan. We're going to be moving on. I can't talk too much about it because I'm on the board. The other area, and just an echo, Tom mentioned the golf course. This has been under our scrutiny for several months. The golf course seemed to be going down the tubes. They weren't keeping it up properly. The good news is just recently they seem to have picked it up and they're starting to put things together. They've been working on the tee boxes and so forth. That is the heart of this community, and I guarantee you that we are looking at it, and we have talked to other people that have been in similar situations with the same owners, and we are staying on top of that. I don't think I have enough time to complete the next one, so I'll just move on. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Our next question is, what experience do you have with Sun City Lincoln Hills Committee's Board of Director meetings, task force, and focus groups in this or any other homeowners association, and how would this experience help you in serving on our board? And that question goes to Joe.
Okay. Well, we moved here after being 60-year residents in Marin County. I was 4 years chair of an HOA in Novato, and it was just scratching the surface of the learning that I've discovered is involved. I've had pretty much a lifetime involvement with nonprofits and their boards. I sat on 3 different chambers of commerce exec committees, 35 years a Rotarian, blah, blah, blah. Here in Lincoln, we first saw Lincoln Hills in 99, as I mentioned. I moved in here in 12, started regularly attending committee and board meetings, spent 3 years on CCOC as we were turning the power of settling all their own rules to the clubs, a couple years on finance. While Hans was finding property that got missed, I was working with Director Laura, who became Director Laura, on the task force that studied and recommended against expanding the well fit. And then the last 2 years on the board, where among others I chaired a task force on the state of our and Lincoln's security. So I've got experience, and it's been fun, and I continue to learn and grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Tom.
Thank you. I've been a city manager and a city attorney. I don't want to just ride on that, but what I want to point out is that I know how to be transparent. And I think not only to be transparent, but to get the trust of the community with what the committees, the boards are doing. In our community is a I call it a quasi-governmental community. If we were a governmental community, we would have a doctrine known as gift of public funds. You can't gift public funds. Well, HOAs kind of ran out on their own here, so David Sterling came into existence to bring some of the governing issues to HOAs as well, which we're bound by. And part of that is, I like to suggest, is not only shouldn't there be gift of public funds, but there shouldn't be gift of homeowner dues. And what I mean by that is a fiduciary responsibility. Obviously, we can gift homeowner dues, but to really scrutinize our expenses. And I think that experience would serve the board well and me well as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Diana.
Well, I told you that I've been in 3 other HOAs, and the problems that we face there we're going to face, actually. The golf course issue was the very first thing that I tackled. And when I started to tell you the story, when we were confronted with a developer by purchasing the property next door, we were going to lose our fourth, fifth, and sixth holes because we couldn't hit on that side. It would go into those houses. We tackled that. We may have a situation similar to that come upon us here. I was a vice president in that association. My rural community association, I was the secretary for years. That's when we were handling poaching, livestock issues, developer encroachments, flooding, dumping, you know, what happens in the country. So those were issues that we had to tackle there. That experience, we don't have dumping here, but who knows, we may have a homeless situation here. I think that being able to handle those issues when they're just dropped in your lap is an experience that I'll be able to bring and help with here. We don't know what's coming. We don't know what we don't know. But I do have the skills to tackle those problems and the energy to do it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Jack.
I've been here 6.5 years, and during that time, I've kind of made it my business to attend as many meetings, board meetings, standing committee meetings, et cetera. I think I have a decent handle on how things work here. I also acknowledge I'm not privy to some things, so I really don't know what I don't know, but I'm anxious to learn. I've been in the Apple Club with 1,500 members for 5 years. I'm currently the vice president. I served for 2 years on the Food and Beverage Task Force, a very frustrating experience. I've served on the strategic plan task force that was initially started a year ago or so, and it has eventually led to the current task force that is working so hard on our behalf. I've taken advantage to serve in focus groups for that and other things whenever I could give input. In my other life, prior retirement, I was twice past president of a very large Lions Club in Sonora, California, where I worked, donated thousands of hours and gave away a lot of money as a charity. I was twice past president of that and also of Kiwanis. So I've done some things. I've donated a lot of time. I know what that's about, and I know what this job would involve, donating a lot of time and for really good pay.
Thank you, Jack. David.
I worked for 40 years in management, and I have a degree in supervision. I've been on this board 6 years, and I've been the president for 1 year. The committees and the staff, these people, what I do is I try to set the stage. I just set the atmosphere, and then I get out of their way, and I let them do their work. I really feel strongly about that. I like small, lean, and mean committees. I don't like these things that have a committee under a committee, and it gets confusing. I don't care for that style. So I try to keep it simple. I've even gone to the extent this year I pulled a couple of board members off as liaisons because I felt they were being heavy-handed. I felt they weren't doing what I wanted to be done, and I thought they were destroying what they were trying to do. So that's the way I operate, and I think it's been pretty successful this year. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Our next question, oh, Hans. Getting out of order here. Hans, sorry.
Okay, well, I already told you in my opening statement all the wonderful things I've done here on the Finance Committee and the Reserves Task Force, and all that, so I won't bore you with repeating that. But I do want to stress that probably one of the most important things that we do have to deal with as a community is finance. But when we started the Reserves Task Force, there were very few people that had any interest in getting involved in that. Nobody on the staff really wanted to be bothered, so I started out with saying, okay, good luck, Hans, here you are, get to head up a task force and nobody wants to work with you. And I have been able, through a slow and tedious process, to develop the relationships with staff and other people to finally get them to come on board and be able to work together. And I've learned in that process that it is the most important thing we do, is learning to work together. I have now a proven record that I can do that when people didn't want to work with me and eventually did. I believe when I get on the board, I will be able to show that again. I can work with anybody, especially people that don't agree with me, because that's more fun.
Thank you, Hans. Our next question is, how would you address the concerns that some residents feel the design guidelines seem to be restrictive? Joe? Oh, Tom. Sorry. They're going to fire me from this
Yeah.
job. Oh, my God.
Well, it's your format. What a great question, Janet. I thank you for that. So, I think that the design guidelines as were set out when we were first formulated gave us a good structure from which to grow from. But I do believe that we now have the ability to enhance what we do with personal tastes, with things that come into more modern perhaps, and it's not going to destroy the structure that was built. So I think we have room to be a little lenient for other people's desires. I know there's a big deal right now going on with lava rock. Some people want to be able to use it in their back lawns, areas, or whatever. And I don't know that there's a problem with that. I would, I'd like to see where the concerns are. But I think when residents have a particular desire to do some changes, that we ought to be open to listening to that and amending our design guidelines to permit it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Diana?
I do believe that some of the guidelines are a little restrictive. I had a call from a friend. She's more than 80 years old, and she got a letter from the compliance committee about the rocks in her yard. Now, they were all native rocks. They were unearthed when she was planting things. They had been there for years. The letter was, in her mind, threatening. There was no resolution. They didn't even tell her what she needed to do to fix it. It was just wrong. So, as far as she was concerned, it was a real crisis. She was too old to move the rocks and asked for my help. So, these kinds of things. Another thing, as I'm canvassing around, I was told that the camera situation, a lady had a camera on the side of her yard, which she wanted to have in the front. She wasn't allowed to do that. And I really think that cameras are a deterrent for crime. And the crime thing around here, oh, there it is. So there are many things that we can look at again. I think the letter can be softer, and the solutions can be offered in for a neighbor. If it's a neighbor complaint, or if it's an unsightly situation like it was on Tiger Lily, I don't know if any of you know about, there was just a place that was weeds overgrown for over a year, and that wasn't handled, and I thought maybe the association could.
Thank you, Diana. Jack?
The first thing I would do when presented with that is encourage the members to become very familiar with the design guidelines and the ARC papers that are in the display room. As I stated before, we tend not to read those things. I didn't, and I made some changes to my house, and I had to go find them, and I was kind of surprised. Why didn't I read this before? So that being said, I think that the ARC and the Compliance Committee have to take somewhat, like Diana has said, somewhat of a softer stance, so that we're not quite as stringent as the guidelines say. There's some tremendous, beautiful homes here that are out of compliance, and because of something like a blue pot or not having a tree, but they're tremendously landscaped and they're great. So my idea would be, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it looks nice and it's really compliant with the community in terms of the appearance, there's a lot bigger fish out there to fry, and leave those people alone.
Thank you, Jack. David?
Someone talked about an open door policy a while ago. I have one. It's a little different than most of them. That means I open my front door and I go out and get in my car and I drive down to Orchard. And I do drive the community, and I walk around and I speak to people, and that's how I keep up, I hope, I keep a decent feeling for the pulse of the community. I have not heard anything about this subject other than the lava rock. That's been around for a few years. I don't know anything about it, and I wouldn't make a value judgment on it. I saw a lot of it in Hawaii, but apparently that's something that we'll want to discuss. The ARC needs to continually discuss and review where we're at and where we're going. The other thing is I think that we all need to understand that all these rules are there for a reason, and we have to abide by them. I've had a lot of people move into my neighborhood and they say, well, we know that's just a guideline and this and that. And I said, whoa, be careful. These are what makes us look good, is because we're consistent and we follow up.
Thank you, David. Hans?
Well, we need reasonable design guidelines to keep this community looking as good as it does. It is not easy to find the right level, and there will probably always be some people who find them too restrictive. We currently rely on the Architecture Review Committee to manage this process and to periodically review and hopefully enhance those guidelines. That normally involves open workshops where homeowners like us can express their opinion. We can also attend the ARC meetings and use the open forum opportunity to express those concerns and opinions. And we could also apply for membership to the committee. That gives us more influence even. If that doesn't work, we can always appeal to the board, that, like someone has recently done, to get approval for this lava rock in the backyard. It seems to me that the current appeals process works reasonably well. It is not perfect, but the way to get things better is to get more involved. And that's what I would encourage all of us to do, even if I don't always agree with what the guidelines are.
Thank you, Hans. Joe?
Yep. Well, for starters, I think too many people buy here without having previously lived in HOA land. Often their realtors don't want to risk possibly missing a sale and don't tell them about some of the requirements that you have if you want to live in a communal type environment, even as loose a one as I think that Sun City Lincoln Hills is. The ARC, Architectural Review Committee, is comprised of us residents, and they'll say, no, you can't paint your house lime green or gloss black. It ain't allowed. And I know people that have moved out of this community because that was so restrictive in their minds. I've not had an issue living within our rules. I think that they're there, and the vast majority of our residents agree that they're good for us. Perhaps we're a little too much in the favor of the color of beige on our houses, but I can live with that. I went to a green this time. So I think that and then there's the compliance committee, which is another whole set of issues, and that can anger folks. But that's part of the process. And it was an issue 2 years ago. It's still an issue. I still would like to have lava rock in my backyard, and don't think it's anybody's business but my own.
Thank you, Joe. All right, our next question is for Diana. What are your thoughts as to how food and beverage is doing? If you think the department needs changing, what would those changes be?
Only 2 minutes? Oh, 1.5. That's why it seems so fast. Well, I want to say 100 suggestions, but I have a lot of suggestions on how we can improve Meridians and the food and beverage overall situation. Of course, again, it's always about the money. Our losses are ridiculous, and they've gone year after year. We need to get a hold of which part of the Meridians is losing money? Is it the bars? Is it the catering? Is it employees? It's not the kitchen. We've found out through the food and beverage that it's nothing wrong with the kitchen. Our food is sometimes very good. Some situations are, you just can't imagine having a nicer dinner, and none of us want to cook. We've been cooking for 50 years. We want to be able to go to a place that has a nice atmosphere, friendly neighbors, and good food. Okay. So I think that our first job is to narrow in on what is causing the problem with food and beverage. Don't allow going over budget. Make sure that people understand their jobs, their service. The hours, I would like to see the hours extended in the bar until at least sundown. These are little things that I can come up, but I have a list that'll choke a horse of things that we can do here. A lot of it has to do with what I learned with boomers, and so I'd like to see that taken care of.
Thank you, Diana. Jack.
This is an issue that's personal for me, having served on food and beverage for a couple of years, and most of my notes are one little card. Here's my notes on food and beverage. And I'll make this as short as I can. It's definitely a weak link here. And I've got a plan, having been on the food and beverage. There's a whole ton of knowledge that I've learned. There's a whole ton of knowledge that the average resident just doesn't understand in terms of our restaurant compared to Denny's or Mimi's, or even to, the only one we can really compare to is Timbers. It's an HOA just like we are. And in that respect, I think we're very similar, with the one exception. They have far better service than we do, consistent service. Everything else I think is comparable and close. So I have a plan, and it all relates around improving the service. We don't need to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I'm not sure we're going to make money, being the fact that we're only 11,000 people here in this community that support the restaurant. So the plan, very shortly, very convenient, shortly, is improve the service by training the personnel, by getting a better retention, employee retention policy. We lose too many of those. And there's a couple other things in there, but to sum up, all of that can be addressed by better leadership and better management of the restaurant. It's that simple, better management.
Thank you, Jack. David.
The restaurant business is one of the toughest ones, as all of you know. Since I've lived here, there's probably been 20 restaurants locally that have gone out of business. Some of them were name restaurants, Mimi's, people that really knew what they were doing, I think. Beerman's has gone in and out of business 5 times. This little Mickey Mouse restaurant down here has been in and out 4 or 5 times. It's a tough business. That's not to say that we can't do better, and I'm certainly not going to make any excuses. Back when we started many years ago, some of the first boards thought that the restaurant should be a formal restaurant. The men should have to wear a coat or a tie. They got away from that pretty fast. So there's been a real inconsistent message to the restaurant, to the people that run the restaurant, and especially, unfortunately, from our board of directors. Each board of directors has a different idea, and they convey that to the restaurant. And I think half of the time they didn't know whether they were going to go right or they were going to go left. Like I said a while ago, I'm concerned about the restaurant breaking even, because I do think there's a correlation between them breaking even and the quality of the food and the service. There is some things going on I cannot talk about right now, but stay tuned on the restaurant.
Thank you, David. Hans.
In 2018, food and beverage had their 3rd best year ever, and 2019 has clearly not been a good year. I recommend that everybody read the 2019 food and beverage report on the member website. It addresses a lot of issues and answers many questions. Nearly all Del Webb communities have had similar problems to what we do. When we look at 2019, results compared to 2018. Total revenue was up 2.1%, while the cost of sales was up only 0.4%. That's positive. On the expense category, the major issue was personnel expenses, which increased more than $331,000, or 14%. Controlling salary expenses is a major challenge, and it's not easy to fix because, unlike other restaurants, we do not know how many people are going to show up on each day. One Monday, it may be full, and the next Monday, there's hardly anybody there. Another problem we have to deal with is the persistent level of negative comments by people who never go to the restaurant. That needs to stop. I heard the exact same comments about the Timbers in Sin City Roseville prior to their expensive remodel. We have delayed our remodel, and it's time to move forward on that. I have some more thoughts, but I may bring those out later. But to me, spending $2 on a restaurant a month is not that much. That's about $163,000 a year.
Thank you, Hans. Joe?
Well, I too am certainly not an expert, but after some years of looking at this, I do know that something has to change to make it work. Albert Einstein back when said, you've heard the statement, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. We've been through 3 different executive directors and the better part of a half dozen heads of this, food and beverage, and we still only done better than break even, made a profit 3 times out of 18 or so from when we began. The glaring fault seems to be labor costs, which are in the 60% range relative to income. And by the way, contrary to some strongly held and stated opinions, there are not 8 or more people making $150,000 a year in food and beverage. There's not one making $100,000 in food and beverage department. So it ain't going just off to some folks that are taking the big bucks. Would that it were that simple. It's not, but we do have plans, and I think that there's ways to change it and make it work. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Tom?
Well, what the community seems to be really good at is excuses. I don't like to compare us to a cruise ship. I don't want to compare us to Timbers. I don't want to compare us to other HOAs. I want us to do what's right for our community. Is this what the community wants? And if this is what the community wants, then we should work to get the quality and the consistency to the level the community wants. The nice thing is Faye's going to have some focus groups in the next 2 months. Maybe we'll get more input. Some people here have suggested we need a whole redesign of the restaurant. But before we put a lot of money into expanding the bars or creating more seating, we should get it fixed first. Now, they talk about the minimum wage. I don't think we should be paying minimum wage. I think we should be paying more. I think we should be a community where people want to work here. And when we walk in the door, the type of training they should have is to know we're not coming in as a customer to this restaurant. We're the owner. Every one of us own this restaurant. And it's not that we have the right to dictate what goes on, but the staff should be focused on their service to the idea they're serving the owners. They're going to have direct input to the board, who's going to have direct input to the executive director, that's going to be wringing our boss's neck. So that's the type of items I'd like to see addressed first before we end up putting a lot of money into redesign.
Thank you, Tom. The next question goes to Jack. Do you think our financial reserve level is adequate? Please explain your answer.
I'm from a background, I'm a former high school principal in charge of 160 employees and a multi-million-dollar budget, and we had reserves. They were 3%, and sometimes 6%, and somehow we made it work. Our reserves here are approaching, I think, around 60% now and approaching 70%. I think our auditors, I've been told by Finance Committee and board members and such that our auditors think that our reserves, our financial situation, as Hans stated earlier, is right up there in the top 10% in the state or the nation in terms of how healthy it is. So I think our reserve level is quite good. I think the board's fiduciary responsibility is to carefully consider future contributions and things that we have to do in terms of the reserves, to look for different avenues of funding the reserves, like the CEF funds. And I know that that's not, that has to be done very carefully as well. But to look at those kinds of things and determine how high do we really need to have our reserve funds? Are they adequate now? And if so, let's not ask for $2 more a month of dues if we're perfect the way we are, as seems to be the case. I'm not in favor of going to 100%, as I understand Roseville has. We have insurance for catastrophic things, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So again, I don't know what I don't know, but the board needs to carefully consider what we're going to do with our reserves.
Thank you, Jack. David?
When monies are put into the reserve fund, they're captured. We can't get them back. Even the board can't get that money out. We can borrow against it, and that's the best we can do. I don't believe in being 100% funded because we're too large. We have too much capacity. Some others, the smaller places, they do stay at 100%, and that's probably wise. I personally think around 70% is about right. We're not quite where we want to be. I think we're at 59 or 60% right now. We just had our 20th anniversary. On your 20th anniversary, a lot of things, a lot of reserve items come due. So the 20th and the 21st and the 22nd year are tough. This next year, you'll undoubtedly get another $2 raise in your dues for the reserves. We can't help it. However, we are on a path to be at 70 or 80%. In fact, I think in 3 or 4 years, we actually soar, we surge up to about over 80%, which I think is a little high. But I think we have it under control. The Browning Group, who does the study for us, they use us as a model. We're in very good shape there. Don't be concerned.
Thank you, David. Hans?
Our reserves are adequate. We have done a lot of work during the last 3 years on our reserves to bring them up to where we want them to be. We're not quite there yet, but we're close. Our reserve contains right now over 1,200 components with a combined cost of more than $22.9 million. The goal we have is to be in, quote, a strong reserve position, which implies a funding percentage of 70%. Because that percentage is a very volatile number, we look for it to be in a range between 60% and 90% for the next 30 years. The summary of the 2019 reserve study that was sent to every homeowner, yes, all of you all got it, indicates a 2019 funding percentage of 58.9%. It will reach 60% in 2021, and after that it's projected to have a low of 61.1% in 2013 and a high of 82.7% in 2032. That is accomplished by increasing the homeowner contribution by $2 in 21 and 22 and half a percentage below the projected inflation rate thereafter. We are in good shape.
Thank you, Hans. Joe?
And that's an example of how confusing our reserves truly are, and I'm happy that folks like Hans are there to dig into it. Yes, we are adequate. One of the ideas that I think that where we can make some mistakes is that we think 100% is an A, and 60% is definitely an F. We spend our lives being told that by our parents and our teachers and such, and it doesn't really apply that way. Also, if we wanted to raise our reserves by $3 or $4 million to get us up toward that kind of level, we can do that. Roseville chose to do it. We can do it. All we have to do is assess each of ourselves, our residents, about $500. You're going to buy that higher level And when someone starts saying, well, how about we do an assessment, or how about we raise the dues enough to generate that kind of money a whole lot faster, you do the math. Divide 6,700 into 3 or 4 million. I think we're doing fine. I think that it's, as Hans said, it's important in little ones. In bigger places such as ours, we have lots of money and we can cover contingencies when we need, if and when we need to.
Thank you, Joe. Tom?
Well, I'm not in favor of assessments, and I think our reserves are, we've run a plan to strengthen them. If they're not adequate now, they will be. But I have questions. Why did we need a $2 increase for reserves? And one thing that I promise you I'll do is ask questions. The Finance Committee's done their work, the board has done their work. Here we are in November, and we're looking at our financial state for the year. And I wasn't a CPA, I don't know a lot about finances, but I sure know what red numbers mean. We're looking up there, and here's $29,000 we spent the month of November on the attorney, on legal fees. And they can't, no one in the board asked the question, but a resident did. Oh, they can't tell us that secret, that's fine. There's another red number, 2.5 times the travel budget's in the red for the year. I used to work for a company when the travel budget was done, you didn't travel. Then there's incentives. I've been against our bonus and incentive system, but I've had some people discuss it with me that I'm misguided. But we had our incentives. Okay, we're going to have incentives. We're going to budget for them. But when I look on the financial report, we're $55,000 in the red on incentives. How in the heck do you go red on incentives? If the money isn't there, why did they get incentives that wasn't budgeted for? I've already got enough for $1 of dues right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Diana?
Well, I have to say our reserve levels are adequate. Well, maybe. Can we trust our financial reporting? Can we trust the evaluation of our assets? If we're supposed to keep it at a level, say 75% of the value of the replacement for our facilities, that's a big number. We have quite a few large structures here, and every time we add something new, we need to increase the amount that's kept in the reserve to maintain the lifetime of that entity. So using some of the community enhancement fund to supply the reserves as needed, I think we can do that. If we're going to have $1 million coming in of other people's money every year or thereabouts, I think that amount of money, maybe we could establish a minimum amount carried in the reserve fund, and then have some of the money be funneled over from the CEF fund, which is the Community Enhancement Fund, that is sitting there. It's unaccounted for money. It's at the discretion of the board to spend, and I think instead of raising dues, maybe that's where some of that offset can come from. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. The next question goes to David. Staffing has become a serious issue, including turnover. With another minimum wage increase coming and competition from other businesses, our executive director is reporting departments are having trouble hiring and keeping good employees. How would you advise the executive director?
Is that to me? Okay. Well, that is a difficult issue. What we have is we're in a lot of competition with the casino, and now there's a new casino. There's a lot of competition around here. We've also found that Lincoln is not exactly a place where people like to move to if they're coming from a metropolitan area. When we start looking for senior supervision and managers of departments, we're having a little difficulty there. We have just recently gone out and been looking, and there's just something about moving to a small town. But anyway, the minimum wage is a problem, and if you think it's not a problem, go other places. Look at, it costs $22 now to go to go to McDonald's for my wife and I for a couple of hamburgers. Things are really changing. I will say this, Our executive director, that is his strong point. He has over 200 employees. He does an excellent job with them. They're very loyal, and they're loyal to us. And their training is to make us happy. And so he does a very good job and makes them feel welcome and secure.
Thank you, David. Hans?
I actually suggested in jest to our executive director that he should apply to one of the several HOA jobs in North Carolina where he could make at least $75,000 more a year than we pay him for the community about half our size with far fewer amenities and a lower cost of living. Of course, he will not do that because he is certainly committed to this community, and we are very fortunate that we have a number of other people working here that feel the same way. Our real problem is attracting new people when they often can make more money elsewhere with an easier commute. Well, the executive director does a lot to make this an attractive place to work for people. At some point, we may have to increase salaries to more competitive levels, even though they could result in dues increases. And keep in mind that the executive director cannot do it alone. We need to ask him what we can do to help. As members of this association, we should not just look at the staff as hired help, like some people do. And maybe we should once in a while tell these people, thank you for your service.
Thank you, Hans. Joe?
The questions came at us with a strange variety or variation, because this is one that I essentially spoke to a little bit earlier as our greatest concern. I think that we've, over the last 3 or 4 years, we have solved the problems of no money left in the kitty for improvements, new things, upgrades, other than dues or assessments. We solved that with the CEF, and we, in fact, doubled that this past summer. So there's dollars there. There are ties and rules as to about how we can spend it and what we can spend it on, however. But we've solved that part of it. We have a plan. The next pot of money is reserves. We have a plan for that. Some of that, which didn't get mentioned, I'll do it as an aside here, that when you find, as they did, the better part of $1 million of stuff that wasn't on the list, that are in various stages of decay and will need replacing, you got to provide for it, and that's why that's gone up. But staffing is going to be simply a matter with our ever-increasing minimum wages here that we have to deal with, and we're going to have to take a deep breath and start facing that. It's the one remaining financial hurdle that we face.
Thank you, Tom. Joe, sorry. Tom, you're next.
Thank you. How would I advise the executive director? I'd ask him, are we getting exit interviews? Maybe it's not the minimum wage that's the issue. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's the way they're treated in their employment. Maybe it's a problem with a supervisor. I've already stated I'd like to pay more than minimum wage, and I'd like to make it a place people want to work. However, I think there could be other inquiries made as to the reasons they're leaving to perhaps enlighten us. I referred to the incentive program. Maybe that's a problem with some of the people. I think it's unfair to employees. You're given a certain salary, and then you got a little bonus here, and then you got to go in and bet your bonus. Essentially what they do, they sit down and bet their bonus. You know, if I'm an employee, I want 100%. Well, if we're going to budget 100% of the bonus, then we ought to be paying them that 100%. And then their evaluation should be based on how well did you do? And do you need to look for another job? Do you need to improve? Or do you get to have a pay raise? So I think we don't know it's exactly just the wage issue, but I think exit interviews would certainly help enlighten the situation.
Thank you, Tom. Diana?
Well, the unemployment in the nation is 3.5%, so we are not experiencing problems that every business doesn't have to deal with. I don't know how the administration is going about hiring. I don't know if they're using headhunters or the internet. But I think Lincoln is a desirable community to come to. Our employees, actually, there are employees that work for, I don't want to say the fun of it, but they're not necessarily staying in a position for the money. I can think of teachers and nannies. Those people stay because they love the work and they love their fellow employees, and it's a good environment to be in. So if an employee leaves, can we combine their duties with another employee and not have to hire another, or can overtime fill the duties? It's always cheaper to hire or have overtime as opposed to hiring a whole another employee. So some of these things we need to look at. What's the environment they're working in? Can we get a happy situation for employees so they wouldn't even consider leaving for another $1 an hour? Something like that might be something we look at if we have a high turnover, but I really don't think we do, because I see the same people have been working here for years. So it's a problem the whole nation is facing, and I think we're in the same situation, and that's just the way it is.
Thank you, Diana. Jack?
2 bells. This is certainly a problem here, especially in my mind, again, in my experience in food and beverage. We lose way too many people for the wrong reasons. And I think, in my previous experience and job occupation, we used to have an evaluation once a year, and we decided what did we do right? Let's continue that. What did we do wrong? Let's get rid of that. And what do we need to improve? And let's work on that. And I think the same thing is here. And we'd go out and steal things from other people, ideas, other programs. Who else has a good retention program for their employees? And let's go out and study it and steal it and bring it here. I don't think that always means bonuses. It can include bonuses, but it can include some other things. Let's reward the people who are really good employees, and we have a lot of those. Let's pay them a little more. Let's set our salary schedule a slightly bit higher than our competitors, the casinos, timbers, whatnot, in terms of the restaurant. Let's attract people, let's attract good people, and then let's find ways to keep them, and that certainly involves what Hans related to, is being out there visible, walking around, telling them what a great job they're doing. Even if they're not doing a great job, get them to have buy-in, get them to own it, as someone else has mentioned. So it's positive leadership and doing some studying. I've talked about this with Chris a couple of times.
Thank you, Jack. That concludes our question segment of our morning. Next, we will have our candidate closing statements. Each candidate will now have 3 minutes for his or her closing statement. Following this, a member issue statement will be read. And we're going to start with Hans.
I had to write this down to make sure that I stay within the time limit. But board members have at times suggested that the first year on the board is primarily a learning experience and getting to know how everything works and getting your feedback. One of the issues to adjust to is the fiduciary responsibility to work for the best interest of the entire community rather than just for the people who voted for you. We cannot come to the board with a specific agenda because we need to have a broader view of the issues we need to deal with. For that reason, anything we can do to get involved, volunteer, and get to know the community can only help make that learning process easier and possibly shorter. While the board has to deal with a lot of different issues, finances are a very important component of that. That includes the annual budget process, as well as oversight of our reserves and managing the Community Enhancement Funds, or CEF. For that reason, the board usually had at least 2 members who had served the full 4 years on the Finance Committee. The current board has only 1 member who served 4 years on the Finance Committee, and he actually served 5 because part of that he served as chairman. But his tenure ends in February, leaving us potentially without. My objective is to fill the resulting gap in Finance Committee experience on the board, and as it turns out, I happen to be the only candidate who can do so. I also hope that next year we can add another person with 4 years of Finance Committee experience. I've been through the creation of and review of 4 budgets, and there is still room for improvement in the process. As I mentioned, our reserves currently include more than 1,200 items, and for a total of $22.9 million. And because of my reserves task force experience, I do have a better understanding of our reserving process than nearly anybody who lives or works here. I was also actively involved in creating the CEF, and I hope our strategic planning process will help develop a list of all potential capital projects to enhance our infrastructure and have that list available to all of us. Those projects can then be discussed, reviewed, and prioritized, and we can determine how the CEF can be used to fund them effectively. But some of those potential projects may not survive the review process. I would bring a lot of Lincoln Hill specific finance experience to the board, and for that reason, I believe my election would benefit our entire community. That's why I ask for your support and your votes. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. Joe.
I would start by saying I would say ditto to almost everything that Hans just said. We joined finance about the same point in time, and
We sit next to each other.
we did. Here we are again. I've had the opportunity and the privilege of looking at it all from a slightly higher level for the last couple of years, while still going to all the Finance Committee meetings and all of that, which is just one of the givens that we do as directors. What I want to talk about now is a subject that I hoped would be asked of us in all 3 of the sessions, and that is that of self-government, which I've made my cornerstone in this election. There are a lot of folks talking about, thinking about, and wanting to see us. Yeah, not a problem. Wanting to see us go to outside management for Sun City Lincoln Hills. I think it's a terrible idea and a terrible mistake. I think that we've outgrown all the outside management systems that are out there and available. We are too big with our $18 million plus budget. We are too interconnected, and it just all works together. And we know what we're doing. We have staff that have been here for almost all of those 20 years, some of our senior management. And I think many, if not most of those, would go by the wayside in favor of off-site department heads, lower-level supervisors on-site, lower pay. The object of that is supposedly running it better, and I don't know how they run it better when they're elsewhere and they've not spent time in this operation with this, knowing that you folks are the owners of this. When a prior executive director said, the natives are restless, I thought, and I heard it and said, that's me they're talking about. I'm the native. We really need to look at hard about that. It's a problem, and it's a fate that we can wander into easily and come and get out of very difficultly and expensively. Many have tried it and failed. Many have seen their dues go up $100 a month as a result, as the long-term, down-the-road end result of that. Let's not go there.
Thank you, Joe. Tom.
Well, thanks for coming out today. I told you that I want more transparency, and I gave some examples today how to just do that, but I also told you how I would accomplish it, and that's asking questions. Now, we've got all this financial experience on the current board, and no one asked questions about the red numbers. It took someone out of the audience. I want to hear the board asking the questions. You know, another good example is here we're spending $121,000 on star thistle grazing. Now, I'm not on the finance committee, but I used to have a little farm, and I'll bet I could buy a herd of sheep for less than $121,000, and then I could go ahead and, when those sheep were done getting fat off our star thistle, take them up to Meridian's and have a big barbecue. And we might make money, who knows? But the other thing, in addition to transparency, is that that we can use. Another example of transparency we can use is the Food and Budget Task Force that 2 years ago that was never released. There might have been embarrassing comments in there or something. It could have been redacted. We can still release this stuff. We can redact information that we think you shouldn't have, and that's what I want to do. The CEF, I'm glad they brought it up. Who pays that? Well, it gets debited against the buyer. The buyer's not paying it. You, the homeowner's paying it. The seller's paying it because a savvy buyer with a good agent's going to negotiate that in the cost, in the total price of your home. Or they're going to think your home's worth $3,000 more because they already know they got to pay it. But that's the way things get sold to us. However, I do want to address the rhetoric and perhaps the unprofessional conduct we've witnessed at board meetings this year. As such, I have proposed a code of ethics. I've got copies of this. They'll be available for those of you who want to see what I've proposed. I didn't dream it up. A group of attorneys in California, the California Education of the Bar, have published a book on advising California's common interest developments. Those are homeowners associations. This code of ethics is part of the appendix to the book. I tweaked a few things. I didn't insert anything on social media. However, it's a place to start and build from. We don't have a current code of ethics. We ought to have one, and how to treat each other and treat our members and as well as conducting ourselves in meetings. Yes, I want your vote, but more importantly, I want your trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Diana.
Thank you all for coming and for caring. This is important, and this is kind of emotional for me because I love this community. I love my home. I love my neighbors. There are so many great things about this community, and I hope to be part of the board and serve you on that. There are 4 new board members from last year that have done yeoman's work. We're on the right path. It'll be better even next year. So your support and your input is important to me, and of course all the other board members also. So continue to let us know what you would like us to do for you. We'll try our best. I'll commit all of my energy in that effort, and I really want to live a harmonious life here and enjoy all my neighbors and our future here. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Diana. Jack.
Thanks, everyone, for coming. I'd first like to acknowledge that there's about 7 or 8 ladies in this room that have been very hard at work the last few months, if not the whole last year, and that's the Elections Committee, so thank you so much, ladies. Yes, you can applaud them.
No applause. Stop it.
I want to end with a couple of comments. This is a serious election. We deal with a $19 million budget. We deal with assets worth over $65 million, so it's not something that goes lightly. All these people up here at the table are good people with good intentions. But I'm not a good politician. I don't play this game very well. I don't deal with liars at all if I can avoid it. I don't do well there. I've said many times that I'm all about integrity first. I got up this morning and made the big mistake of reading the Yahoo site. There was a post about me specifically, along with many of the other people sitting at this table, that was just a blatant lie. And again, I don't deal well with liars. I take it personally when someone calls me a liar, and that's basically what they did. I'm going to read part of this again. I will do what I say I will do. I take it very personally when someone attacks my integrity. That's my most important quality, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm a little bit, you can tell, I'm a little bit upset by that. I've been told I'm too honest for my own good. Well, that's the way I am. You're going to know how I feel. Yeah, I like your vote. I'd like all your votes. But more important to me than that, it's important that you believe what I say. I'm not in this for the fun. It's not any fun doing this. It's a lot of hard work. So I'm in this for the right reasons, I think. But when someone calls me a liar, I just don't like it. I don't deal with it well. And we're all good people with good intentions, and we just shouldn't be treated that way. So again, I bring significant experience in leadership and negotiation into this process, and I really believe I can work with these people as well as current board members to advance what's best for all residents here at Sun City.
Thank you, Jack. And thank you for the comment. That was really nice. David.
I'm going to tell you everything that's good about this place. We're in very good shape. We're in good condition. 2 years ago when I came on the board, we were met with an audit report that was less than desirable. There was a lot of challenges. The board last year started a process, and we finished it up this year. That same audit team, this is their second trip in here. I've just talked to them, had a preliminary discussion. I don't have a final. But all of those issues have vanished. We fixed them. We have a new finance department, and they are on top of it. I really like, when we fortified the CEF fund, it was one of the best things we ever did. It's going to generate about $1 million a year outside our budget so that we can keep this place very nice. We are in the process of redoing our sports complex. It's going to be state-of-the-art when we get finished. This next year, I want to pay off our solar project. That'll generate another $400,000 of discretionary funds, if you will. That's going to be helpful. Where do we go from here? I would really like to see us get into, this is just my opinion, I'd like to see us move on into the ballroom area. We're having over 80 weddings a year in the ballroom now. It's very lucrative. I'd like to see us fix up that ballroom, and I think it's time that the actors and dancers had a new place to perform. So that's one of the things that I want to do for the future. I'm listening to people, and if you have ideas about things that you want to do, we are certainly open to that. Another thing I'd like to do is perhaps start we used to call it a PIP team, Profit Improvement. And this is made up of various and sundry different people, but I'd like to start some sort of a profit improvement team for us. It'll help our staff, it'll help all of us, and we might even save some money. We have cumulative voting. I have never been critical of anyone that gave me all 3 of their votes. I think we're headed in the right direction. I think this next year is going to be even grander than last year. So I do ask for your vote. I'd like to stay around a couple more years. After that, I'll be pushing 80 and I need to get out of here. But thank you for coming and talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Well, this year we have one member statement which will be read aloud. Member statements advocating a point of view are permitted according to California Civil Code 5105A. The content of the membership statement is the responsibility of the member, not the Board of Directions or the Election Committee. Copies of this member statement are available on the information tables in both lodges and also printed in the December Compass. Denny Valentine will now read his member statement.
Thank you, Janet. My name is Denny Valentine, and this is my member statement. Members in this community have a responsibility to elect a board of directors of concerned members familiar with our practices and policies. They must be prepared to conduct the business of the corporation, which has a $19 million budget. We selected board members last year who were ill-prepared for the job. 3 members hadn't served on committees or attended committee meetings. There is no understanding of governing documents, laws governing homeowners associations, and the rules of engagement and staff causing a potential for a hostile work environment lawsuit, which would be very costly to this association. Fresh board talent is valuable, but candidates must first demonstrate they are prepared to serve. Otherwise, governing the association rests with just a few more seriously dedicated directors. Committee workshop and board meeting attendance provide valuable insights into the issues and operations of the association and informs candidates about the commitment they are making and the decisions that will have to be made. Our responsibility as the electorate is to vet candidates and satisfy ourselves that they are knowledgeable and prepared to represent the best interests of all of our members with the future of this community in their mind. Results of this election may impact our property values and quality of life in this active adult community. Your vote counts. Please cast it wisely.
Thank you, Danny. Please hold your applause for a minute. I'm now going to ask the candidates to exit to the question room. They will be going out this door so we don't cause a traffic jam here. And while they are leaving, please give them a round of applause so we know how much we appreciate them. We thank you for coming, and when you get your ballot packet, please read it carefully. Make your vote count. Do not make any mistakes on those ballots. They can become invalid, so really pay attention to how you vote on your ballots.